Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of BIM Pure Live. I am your host, Nicolas Catelier. I am an architect, a BIM specialist, and the founder of BIM Pure. We've got a great episode for you today with a great guest. But before moving on to the guest, I'm going to say hello and mention our sponsor, which is Guardian. Let's cue in the video. So Guardian is a Revit add-in to help you clean your models, train your team, and protect your work. So in the previous week, we had a glimpse of some of Guardian feature. This week, we're exploring how you can train your team, real-time training, especially when combined with training resources. It could be internal or even some BIM Pure resources. And in the latest 3.3 version, you can use almost all Revit commands to train your team with in-context messaging. So what makes it so powerful, it's always real time. So in this case, the user tries to explode a CAD file. So that's something we saw in the past where you can set up a warning to say, please never explode any CAD file ever. But something new and different that if introduced as well, you can do is that you can train your user. In this case, if they try to import a CAD file, they say, hey, importing CAD is not ideal. Why don't you link instead? And if the users try to link the CAD file, you can set up a custom message. You can see in this case, for example, they're being linked to resources. This is a BIM Pure example of our pamphlets that explains you how to the best practices to link CAD files, but you could use that or your own internal resource training with any links or PDF that you want to set up there. Yeah, you can set up all your custom messages. Then you can decide how often you want to remind users with this information. So it's right in the context at the moment they're trying to use the tool. And now this also works since the 3.3 version of Guardian with almost all Revit API commands, such as railings, for example. So same thing here, when the users try to use the railings, since often junior architects or interns are often put on railings and stairs, you can point to the correct resources. Once again, an example with our BIM Pure pamphlet about Revit railings, but you could use your own internal information instead. But again, the goal is to have in the moment when users need to use a specific tool, you can point to the correct resources at the right time. So again, Guardian can help you protect your work and keep clean Revit models, but it can also be used, such as in this case, to help you train your team. So follow the link in the video description to learn more about Guardian. Thanks a lot to Guardian for sponsoring this episode. The next episode of BIM Pure Live is going to be in 2 weeks. When is that? January 28th with Kevin Cardoso at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern. And this is Revit Concrete Masterclass. Kevin is probably the world leading expert when it comes to concrete modeling inside of Revit. This should be a fascinating episode. He's been there on the show like maybe 3 years ago, something like that. So he's returning for a second time for another live masterclass about concrete. So check it out. I think the link to the calendar for this specific event is in the video description as well. All right, final thing, then we're moving to the guest. And by the way, if you're watching live, you can say in the chat where you are watching from. Final thing, the winter of BIM 2026. So since 2 years ago, we launched a membership that includes courses, downloads, even now a BIM Pure plugin. And we just announced our program for this winter, new content that's going to be included for our BIM Pure members. We've got live keynote session with Brian McKee about keynotes and tagging. We've got our casework collection for Revit that's going to be released in late February. The legendary Paul Bin is joining us for 2 live master classes about advanced Revit modeling. It's going to be about facade and about roofs. And finally, we're putting the final touches on our Mastering ACC for Revit project courses. So enroll now and get access to all of this content along with our back catalog of Revit courses and downloads. All right, I finished saying everything important. Let's look at the chat and to see where people are watching from. We've got Augusto from Brazil, Jais from London, Kirk from Ottawa, that BIM guy from Iowa, Nasham 4 from Cameroon, someone from Germany, Egypt, Pennsylvania, Orlando, Argentina, all around. We've got Stjepan, former guest of the show as well, Thanks for watching. Okay, today's guest is Victoria Ikede. Victoria's role at Architecture 49. She's now working there in Toronto. Previously, she worked in Italy, Slovenia, the UK, and Canada. She spoke at multiple conferences, such as the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, and she also teaches at Toronto Metropolitan University. She's a BIM manager, but since a few years, she's also started championing AI implementation, and she's the national AI lead at Architecture 49. So welcome to the show, Victoria.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. This is so exciting. Like I've been a fan since your Revit Pure days when it was still trademark Revit Pure.
Yeah.
Really excited to be here. So it's like a dream come true. The young version of me is feeling fulfilled today.
Well, happy to hear that. Yeah, yeah.
How's it
By the way,
going?
yeah, I think did I mess up your last name?
No, you got it. It's Ikede.
Ikede. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, you did a good job. Yeah. Nice to see everyone. I see all my Nigerians in the comment section. Thank you for showing up. Nigerians will always show up for their own. Like I'm pretty sure there's some people who aren't even architects just watching this to support me.
So,
It's nice.
yeah. Yeah. Hello. Lots of people today watching live. So hello to
Yeah.
everyone. So I want to start. I want to understand like your path, because looking at your resume, you
Mm.
work in a lot of places, in mostly in BIM roles at the beginning of your career. So can you tell me about your career, how it evolved, and how you got interested in BIM, and how you worked all around the world like that?
Well, I think first of all, I didn't work everywhere, although
Mm-hmm.
in some ways I did because I've always been the kind of person who works while studying. So I did have jobs in all of those places, but I think my m most professional career, the amount of time I've spent would be predominantly in Nigeria and in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So to start with, I studied architecture. My career started in architecture. I think people forget that BIM wasn't a thing people studied. So as much as we have several BIM professionals now and BIM experts, there wasn't really courses to study BIM when many of us started our journey. So you're either an engineer or you're an architect or something along those lines, right? So I started as an architect, and then after my first degree, I worked as an architect. I think I immediately could tell that the design aspect of architecture wasn't going to be fulfilling for me. Um, and I've always loved technology. So I was looking for ways to explore this. Like even in my first degree as a student, this was like 2008, 2009. um, I was really fascinated by Revit. Like I would work on Revit in the lab after hours when everyone else was doing design, right? So I knew I liked that sort of thing. But BIM wasn't really a career. And I think people forget this, is everyone who you see doing BIM today was very, very brave and very, very stubborn because it wasn't really a job that existed until like it became one. So after that, I moved to England to do my master's in architecture. One of the people who taught me there actually now lives in Canada and we're still in touch. That's Dr. Mark Meyer. I think he sort of gave me the confidence to take this as a career because he taught me everything about computational design, BIM. And because I worked closely with him, I was able to teach in the university after that degree. So I worked at the University of Sheffield in England for some time. At the time, we were exploring VR. So it was Unity, and we did some photogrammetry. So we were checking out like how to go to a site. I think we went to a site in Austria, now that I remember. We went to Graz, so they have this city center square, and we didn't have a drone or any cool laser scanning equipment. So what he did was we should all split in different groups and take photos on our phone. And with our phone images, we did like a really nice scan of that site, and we're able to do a lot of cool stuff with VR. So that was sort of like my lab into BIM and technology and every all these exciting things. And so after that process, I moved back to Nigeria, and that's when I started working as a BIM manager. But like I've said, most of this is like self-driven knowledge, right? So when it came time to do like a proper BIM education, I went back to do my master's. I did the BMA plus Erasmus master. For those in Europe, everyone knows what Erasmus is. So I am a proud Erasmus candidate. But so that I did 6 months in Milano. So I spent time there in Politecnico di Milano. And then I went to University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. That's like Balkan region of Europe. So I've sort of been everywhere. And then I moved. I remember I had to come here like the day after my thesis, like to Canada. So like I did my thesis. Next day I was in Venice getting a flight to Quebec. And then from there I came to Toronto. So I like to think that I've been everywhere.
Hmm.
I've sort of journeyed through the continent. So I've seen what that helped me do, especially because I was doing a lot of that European travel during COVID, is I've seen where different organizations are when it comes to technology and different perceptions of what is required to do these things successfully. So it gives me a very well-rounded context, and obviously makes me very resourceful because I've had to adapt to different cultures when it comes to these things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right that a lot of people that started with BIM, especially maybe like 10 years ago, so it was almost like by accident a little bit. People in
Yeah.
our AC field that were obsessed with technology and that ended up trying to
Yeah.
understand this BIM thing. I think that's
Yeah.
also why a lot of BIM people are well positioned or similar people exploring this new AI wave because it's the personality type where you're a little bit obsessed with AI. Okay, so
Yeah.
I know you have some slides prepared. You're going to move there soon, but I'm just curious. I want to ask you what differences do you see around the world when it comes to BIM? I know generally speaking, BIM as a concept is maybe a bit more advanced in Europe, in maybe even the UK since you've been there. How does it compare to your experience in Canada
Yeah.
and what you've seen in North America?
Oh, that's a very good question. So this is what happened actually. I was in UK, University of Sheffield, 2016. Earlier that year, the UK policy that all government projects should comply to BIM level 2. At the time, there was no ISO. It was PAS 1192, if you remember those days. The regulation had just been passed, so both the academics and the professionals were all like trying to understand what is this BIM thing. And I think that was why it was a good time for me to get into it. So as a student, there was a lot of interest for people to research BIM. So even though I was doing a Master of Architecture, I ended up spending the whole time just learning about BIM and reading. I read through all the original PS 1192 documents. So when the whole ISO conversation started, it was kind of, I was already familiar with the whole idea. And now, as a professional in Canada, people throw ISO in my face like, we're doing this because it's according to ISO. And I'm like, I've read the ISO. This has nothing to do with ISO. I think a lot of people hide under ISO now because a lot of people don't read it. And so it's easy to just say, no, we're doing this because it's ISO. So I find that funny. But to compare, back to your question, I think that there's a perception in every country, and not just in England or Canada, even in Nigeria, there's a perception that someone else is really advanced when it comes to BIM. And I found it's like a perception that everyone has. So even in Europe, there's certain people who think, oh, probably in Canada, they're doing more than we're doing, or probably in the US, they're doing more than we're doing. And here they're like, oh, probably in Europe, they're doing more than we're doing. So I feel like it's like that Spider-Man meme where everyone is like pointing at each other.
Yeah.
I will say though, there's more infrastructure in Europe. So
Hmm.
in terms of education, I don't think there are enough schools of architecture or engineering teaching BIM. I know that they exist, but I don't think it's at the same level. Like the BIM A plus master that I did, I think I learned a bit more advanced topics than some of the people I've spoken to who studied BIM here. I think here it's very Revit centric. Like we don't really talk about open BIM as much or IFC. Like I had to read the whole IFC schema and understand the like XML, like the text format, right? So I think in that sense, education and also policy. So like the governments in these other places have enforced BIM, so there is a real incentive. But here it's often client driven. So depending on the project you're on, if the client is asking for those things, or if they have a representative asking for those things, then you have to deliver. But If you're not, then you might as well just sketch on PDF, you know? So
Hmm.
I think those are the differences. But from a individual level, it's still very much dependent on sort of the enthusiasm of the person. Again, I think it would take many years for both education and HR to catch up with what is the exact skill set for BIM. We all know there's some kind of Revit or ArchiCAD involved, but like what other skill sets? Because a BIM person is usually one or two max. They can't do all the Revit or all the ArchiCAD or whatever like software there is. So I feel like that's a bigger conversation around like the skills of BIM. But yeah, it's very interesting comparison for me all the time because I get that question a lot.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And people ask me all of the time, well, how is BIM in Canada? How is BIM in Quebec? And it's a bit hard to know because I haven't worked really directly in other
Yeah.
countries. So I have some ideas, but
Yeah.
you kind of uniquely positioned since you've worked all around the world. All
Yeah.
right.
And there's
Yeah.
also, sorry, I was just gonna say there's a cultural thing too, because even the approach to work in these countries are different. Like
Hmm.
the amount of energy is the word I'd use that goes into work. It's very different depending on where you are. Like even in Canada, I'm sure it's different in Toronto than Quebec, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we
yeah,
got our own kind of provincial
yeah,
things and associations going on. So if I was
yeah.
to go to Ontario, I'm pretty sure it would
It'd be
be
completely different.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
hard. All right, let's pivot to AI. You know, I've called the name of the episode "Evolving from BIM to AI," and I thought it's something that could be interpreted in two different ways, right? Like the surface interpretation is
Sorry,
like
are you getting any music or is that just me?
I'm not getting music.
Okay,
Maybe you
I
have a
think
browser
it's
window open
me.
somewhere.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
my
anyone hearing music in the chat?
no. Okay, I'm sorry. It's from my slideshow.
Oh,
Continue.
okay, okay, okay. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I was saying evolving from BIM to AI on a surface level. It implies like BIM is going to become AI, which I don't really think that would be a
Mm.
superficial evaluation. I think AI could help BIM,
Hmm.
but I thought from a career level, like that's almost a more interesting question. How personally, if you've been involved in the BIM space, how can like should you embrace AI as a career path moving forward? How much time
Hmm.
should you spend exploring these new tools? So like
Hmm.
these are two parallel discussions that
Hmm.
I thought could set the table.
Hmm.
And I know you have some slide prepared, so we can also move to it
Yeah.
and talk about the whole thing while you're showing all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I think to clarify is what is BIM and what is AI? And most people have some understanding of what these things mean. But even just looking at the acronym, you see that there's an overlap in the I. So there's the information in BIM and there's the intelligence in AI. And that's where there's like if there was a Venn diagram, that's where the two things would overlap, right? Um, BIM is like the foundational layer. We're setting up structures, we're creating structured data. We are trying to make sure that the information is consistent and useful across the building lifecycle, not just for designers. And I mention this because I think a lot of designers get frustrated with BIM because they don't really see the value at the design phase, which is kind of the point. The value is not necessarily to the design phase, it's for other life cycles in the project. But then AI builds upon that, like the next level of using this intelligence and this data to create knowledge systems and extract wisdom from it. So we are not fully there. Like I think AI is still in its infancy. The AI we have right now, I'd compare it to like a teenager. It's still growing. But the idea is all of this information and all of this data and all of these processes that we've set up for BIM, now it's time to actually extract insights from them and actually use them to do meaningful things. But there's a key distinction between AI and BIM, and I'll just share a slide that talks about that. So, first of all, it's very easy to think, oh, I know BIM, I like tech, so why don't I just do AI? But you're forgetting one thing. AI is not engineering specific. Like BIM, for the most part, is engineering specific. You don't have your accountants necessarily involved. Even though when I was learning BIM, the idea was that it would be all encompassing. It would be literally everyone on the project sort of sharing data in a common data repository. I think we've since moved away from that. It's now more or less engineering specific. AI is everyone. Literally anyone who works in an organization is impacted by AI. So if you're thinking about an AI position, it may depend on where you work, but from my experience, I'm responsible for clarifying what AI will mean for the organization, but not just for the engineers, for everyone. So I'm looking at PowerPoint, I'm looking at Word, I'm looking at Outlook, things that don't have anything to do with design. So I think it's worth understanding if you have a mindset of digital innovation as it affects business processes in general, or if you are more just interested in the engineering aspect. And I think if you can clarify that for yourself, then you can choose to be more vocal about AI. There is a lot of risk with AI that is not so much there with BIM. And that's not to say that BIM leaders don't have risk management, but AI is just much more sensitive. I'll give you an example. We have these laws now in Canada for data sovereignty where you are subject to the laws of the country where your data is hosted. So let's say I'm using an app where its servers are in the EU. I have to comply with the EU Data Act. Many people don't even know what the act says at the moment because, I don't live there anymore, right? So I think being an AI leader is less about the techie side, which is what I think a lot of BIM people enjoy, but it's more of risk management, communicating with all stakeholders, not just engineers, and explaining to them what they can or can't do. And because the output from AI is so randomized, then you are in a position where you're creating standards for something that is not predictable. So that becomes a very interesting creative challenge. With BIM, like you're making your Revit standards or your BIM execution plan, you kind of have an idea of what the output is, but AI is going to be random, except you're using control nets and all those interesting things. But even then, there's always a degree of randomization. So what I found in my experience, since we started the AI group at A49, is because we've been doing it for some time, we build certain skills in how we use AI that we feel comfortable to say, oh, this tool probably is good to go and ready to be deployed. But then when you are going back to a beginner, it's very different. Like, I don't know if you've ever showed a beginner how to prompt. You'd be surprised that you know how to prompt. And I know a lot of people think about prompting like it's organic, you're just asking for things. But I think the more you interact with AI tools, as a human being, you immediately start to identify when I ask a question this way, it works. And when I ask it this way, it doesn't work. So you sort of build a skill of sorts, even if you don't have formal prompt engineering training, which I have, by the way. I did the whole Google prompt engineering
Yeah,
course
there's
to
a
learn
course about
about.
that. What is
Yeah.
that?
So basically, they're teaching you how the AI systems actually read the information. So you're learning theoretical frameworks like few shot prompting, chain of thought prompting, directional stimulus. It sounds very complex. So again, if you're going to be an AI lead, how do you distill all of these very technical, non-engineering things to engineers? Like, how are you telling your architect, this is how you do chain of thought prompting? Like, they just want to know how to get the thing they're asking for, right? So I think there's an overlap, but if you're going to choose even BIM, I think there's always an internal reflective component you have to do to decide if that's the kind of work. Because I know a lot of people who got into architecture, for example, and got shocked at how little design they were doing. For just as a simple example, like architects do design, but there's so many other things that architects also have to do. So before you consider, oh, I want to move from BIM into AI, because it's trending right now, there's a lot of attention. It can have its benefits, but it's also worth not understanding the kind of work it entails. You're not always going to be playing around with AI tools. Businesses require real value and real like tangible outputs if they're going to invest in something. So it's not enough to just like, oh, I'm testing out the latest AI tools every day. There may be a bit of that, which is fun, but there's a lot of responsibility to distill what you learn into a way that an entire team can actually use them. So I
So
think that's, yeah.
I just want to ask you, what is the name of the prompting course that you took? Is it free? Can people that take it online?
I don't think it's on Coursera. So
Coursera,
Google
okay.
has a series of courses on Coursera. There's one for just introduction to AI. There's prompt engineering course. I've taken Stefan's course. I know he's somewhere watching this, so I have to shout out Stefan because I think we had a conversation early on when I started this whole thing. His course is also really good for just understanding the responsibility, the risks, the tools. But also for free, if you go on Stanford's YouTube channel, that has been the number one resource I have found on YouTube for AI. They explain large language models and how they work. They explain diffusion models, which is the model that lets you make images. So those would be the free resources I could recommend. And obviously my YouTube channel, because I've started a AI series, have to plug that in there. The BIM Mentor YouTube channel. So I've started sharing some knowledge. I try to not put noise on the internet. I think everyone is already saturated. We're in an attention economy. So it takes me a bit of time to distill all of the things I do into something that I think is useful for people. So that's why sometimes it's very hard to talk about AI because there's all this work that goes into testing, refining, communicating, and then you find maybe a workflow is good, but it doesn't really translate to practice. So simple example, I'm going to call out one tool here, Veras. So Veras is this exciting rendering tool that you've talked about on your channel. It works
Hmm.
well with Revit, Forma. It's now in Enscape.
Yeah,
And
they've
I
been
think it's a
acquired by
great tool.
Chaos.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really great tool, but it has been very challenging to train people in a way that they can get what they want every single time. And that's the AI aspect of the randomization thing is certain tasks support ideation, brainstorming, random outputs. Certain tasks need to be specific. Like I know the OAA in Ontario, we have certain requirements for renders, actually. It's not just enough that you have a nice looking glossy image. So how do you program that into an AI tool, right? So even though we've been using that tool quite well, there have been certain instances when we want a quick AI render, but it's not suitable. And I guess some people will say that's not what it's designed for. But that's the thing is, I'm an enthusiast. I'm happy with just whatever AI gives me because I know how incredible it is to go from days of using like 3ds Max to render to 5 minutes. But the person who I'm training or the person who's coming to me for support doesn't have this enthusiasm that I have.
Hmm.
They just want what they want. So
Yeah.
that has been the challenge is sort of communicating standards and control with AI because it is by definition kind of random.
Yeah, and in the end of the year episode that we had with the Azabim Guru and then the Revit Kid, yeah, Gavin and Jeff, I think Gavin mentioned sometimes you need to go touch grass a little bit and just talk to regular users and see what are the challenges because it's easy to almost get sucked into, oh my God, this AI workflow, it's so amazing. We're gonna do
Yeah,
everything with that tool now. And then
yeah,
you realize, well, people are just not on that level. They don't really want to use this, or it's too complex. You need a stepping stone first. You need a plan.
yeah,
So yeah, go touch grass sometimes.
yeah, yeah. That completely agree. That's a good segue into the fact that like AI, as much as I love it, I feel like people aren't talking enough about the environmental impact.
Hmm.
To have all these servers, you need a lot of water. And many of the places where these servers are being built, they're already complaining of water shortages. So I'm kind of at a conflict because as a tech enthusiast, I feel like AI is the best thing that happened to us. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about AI, but just digging into the computational achievement that it is. So if you think about neural networks as the basis of the modern AI, that's large language models and diffusion models, all these ChatGPT Midjourney tools that we have. if you think about the software architecture and the fact that it was achieved, it's just objectively impressive. Like whatever the outcome is, the fact that we were able to build this is something that fascinates me. I've always been very fascinated with the human intelligence and how that works. Like even as a child, I think I had a very good memory. So I was always curious, like how is it I can remember these things and people forget? Like the fact that someone was able to come up with mathematical equations that then simulate that in a computer is just objectively impressive. But there's also the human aspect is people are getting too dependent on AI. People are using AI as a therapist. That's apparently the most common usage of ChatGPT is therapy, which is shocking.
Yeah,
But
people,
not,
Gen Zers
yeah,
are using them as their therapist. And oh, my day at
I've seen
school
older
today was, yeah.
people.
All people of all generation. You're right. I shouldn't just
Yeah,
point one generation.
yeah. I mean, well, generally speaking, Gen Z and below are usually more comfortable with technology. But
Yeah,
I've seen, in fact, I feel like younger people are more cautious because
yeah,
they
I think so.
understand the
You're right.
risk. Yeah, I've seen people put things on ChatGPT that they shouldn't put anywhere on the internet.
Hmm.
But there's that trust when it's just on your mobile phone that it's just like you and the technology, but it's not really the case. Also, worth mentioning to everyone who's watching this, you should check on your LinkedIn and your Gmail because in certain countries, training AI is automatically turned on and you have to go and turn it off. So usually they should ask you before turning it on, but that's not what they've done in some countries. It's already turned on that LinkedIn is training its AI on your data. So just a free tip for everyone here is check on your apps and see which one is training its AI on your data.
Yeah, I know with ChatGPT, OpenAI, you have to go in there to the privacy and manually turn it off. By default, it's
Yeah.
on, like it trains
Yeah.
its models with your prompts.
Yeah. And I've seen people think maybe if they don't sign in, then it's fine. But
Hmm.
that's not really how that works, guys. And I know even when you turn it off, I'm a skeptic. I think that's just for your peace of mind.
You shouldn't trust these companies, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess I know larger companies like they pay for the extra tier to have extra security and
Hmm.
like extra privacy. Sometimes it's done
Hmm.
directly with Microsoft. But a
Hmm.
larger firm, I know like this
Hmm.
is on a whole other
Yeah.
level that
Yeah.
it's a bit more difficult for smaller firms to get access to. And
Exactly.
I know a lot of smaller firms are struggling with AI implementation. They're not too sure where to start or
Yeah.
how to deal with it. But larger
Yeah.
firms typically have already resource working on it, and they already have
Hmm.
some pretty interesting systems set up.
Hmm. Yeah. I think if you're trying to think of where to begin with AI implementation, it's easy to go into tool first. So you start researching all the tools, learning all the tools, but then you kind of get lost in what we call tutorial purgatory, where you're just learning forever. And
Hmm.
a lot of us like what's the word they use for early adopters, we are kind of
Hmm.
excited about learning. So it's very easy to get trapped in like, oh my God, there's this new thing. But I think what's more valuable is to define what you want out of the AI system and then tailor your search to that. So a good thing to ask is, do we have any kind of structured data? So simple example, I think one of the easiest use cases for AI is for proposals, either proposal writing or deciding if you're going to do a request for proposal. That's an easy, repeatable use case. It's text-based. We know that large language models are more or less reliable at this time. But then a lot of the data some people have is like PDF or not Word to PDF, but like InDesign or
Hmm.
like an image of text, right? Which we know AI can read an image and convert it to text, but you're not going to get the same quality of output. So I think it's first identifying what data you have and then asking what sort of insights do you want from this data. So um there are a lot of things I may not be able to share about like what we do in our organization, but largely speaking, getting output from meetings and PDFs is now status quo when it comes to AI. Almost everyone knows there's a way to do that. However, what does that mean as a professional? So let's say you're using AI for your meetings. You want to use AI for meeting minutes. You have Read AI or one of these more popular tools. Sometimes it doesn't pick up on short phrases. So let's say we're having a debate and my conclusion is, no, we will not be doing this. That's a very key decision that I've made for the project. But AI is probably going to think that phrase is too short to show up in the minutes, right? So what does that mean if you're telling people, oh, from now on, we're going to start using AI as an assistant for meeting minutes? Also, a lot of people will just take that meeting minute and just dump it, maybe like in a chat. What does that mean in terms of archiving? Are we now just going to start going through AI back in time to check all our videos? Or is there a process now that agents are the talk of the town? Maybe there's a way to link those minutes to a, formatted, templated Word document. So I think a lot of people don't appreciate how much policy management and risk management goes into managing technology in general. That's something I've always liked, like the whole idea of digital innovation and operational efficiency, but it's not for everyone. I think a lot of people really just want the cool tools. So I think depending on where you are, in terms of what kind of skills you want to have, it's worth, again, just comparing which roles or which kinds of things are better, right? Like I think for AI, it's not like BIM where, let's say I wanted to do a training plan, I would have to come up with maybe X number of people need Revit, X number of people need Navisworks. With AI, it doesn't matter what the tool is, all they'd have to do is prompt for something. That's not a 1 week training. What I'm supposed to now figure out is what are they allowed to do or not do? Where are they allowed to put the data? And in what ways could this be catastrophic if someone forgets to do what they're supposed to do? So that's sort of, the key difference, I'd say, between the two.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that BIM is a bit more straightforward use of technology and of course a process, managing people, so on. But AI is this extra layer of ethical concerns, legal concerns, operational, business concerns,
Ownership is a big one.
ownership. So
Yeah.
it goes deeper than more complex
Yeah.
question than with AI in many cases.
Yeah. And with BIM, we've been with the technology for longer. We understand the technology. We know its limits. Even the engineers of AI have admitted that they've designed the neural network and they understand the mechanism, but the how is a black box. Like it's just like how does our brain figure out information? Like we know the theory, but we don't know the how. So I think that that's the biggest shift with AI is if somehow people get comfortable with that uncertainty, there'll be more adoption. Because right now, I know that there's a lot of talk about AI and it's very hyped, but I think it's gotten more traction in software engineering industries than, let's say, AEC, because people have tried and they've seen, oh, okay, maybe this is a bit risky. Maybe we need to slow down a bit.
Yeah,
So,
it seems pretty good at coding, especially the Claude coding thing
yes,
that I've been exploring
yes,
these videos, and like
yes,
the programming world seem uh,
very
pretty amazed by
advanced.
the tool. Yeah, so it
So
seems like it's
yeah,
actually being used on most kind of
yeah.
coding programming companies. Where in AEC we're like, oh, we're not quite sure which way to use it.
I mean, it's gotten a lot of traction for rendering, but
Uh
then
huh.
again, that's when you want like an initial conceptual render.
Hmm.
So, Veras is a good one. Um, I've used this web tool. It's called Minimal AI, but it's spelled MNML. I really like that one as well. But what I'm exploring right now is Comfy UI because I feel like if you have a Dynamo background, Comfy UI gives you an extra layer of control that you wouldn't get with some of these text to image tools. And also, in terms of standardization, I think I'm able to create a standard Comfy UI workflow better than, let's say, a Midjourney workflow or a Veras workflow. Again, I know that Veras is coming out with impressive updates, so maybe my knowledge is outdated. But I think there's an extra layer of control when it comes to renders that people are missing. When it comes to text, like AI, like the custom GPTs or the agents, if you're using Copilot, I think that's kind of status quo. Like I was in a conference in Alberta a couple of months ago, and everyone was coming up to me saying how they have like a custom GPT for their organization. So I feel like people are more comfortable with documentation in general, not just in AEC. Like people feel confident. People are more confident that AI can be trusted for tasks where text is required than anything else at the moment, I'd say. For coding, I love it. And I have a video on my channel where I used ChatGPT to make a Revit add-in. But what I'm noticing is the shift in coding. It used to be that when you ask AI to generate, let's say, a Python script or let's say C# script in this instance, you can't really trust that you can troubleshoot it because you didn't write it. So when there's a bug or something crashes, you don't know where to look because you didn't write the code. That used to be the biggest issue and complaint about using AI for coding. What I'm now noticing is because of the whole agentic workflow explosion and people now using agents almost like a digital simulated version of their physical team.
Can you explain what agents
What
are?
an
I know,
agent is?
I know maybe most people know, but like,
Okay.
let's assume we have some people who are
Who
maybe
don't know.
confused about agent.
Yes, I think, let me see if I have any image on my slideshow. Okay, I do not. So, I think the simplest way I can explain agents, if you think of traditional AI as you have a question, you prompt, let's say you want to know how to plan for your vacation, you would go to ChatGPT and ask, I'm going to this place for X number of days. Can you give me an itinerary? With the agent, you set a goal. The goal is vacation X number of days under XYZ budget. The agent then decides which AI app it should. This is a very theoretical example. Please do not quote me on this. But the agent decides which AI app it will ask for the itinerary and then decides which response it will take. And then also probably could help you book your accommodation as well. So the agent is almost like when we were doing, if anyone here did like Galapagos in Rhino, where you're like doing form optimization, or Dynamo, where you're like checking for the best option. The agent needs a goal and like decision-making points. That's what you as the creator design. And then it decides what to do in between. So you're not telling it, this is what I want, or, oh, this is the code I want, produce a C# script that will do blah, blah, blah. The agent will ask for the code, debug the code, check if it's meeting your like the goal or not. And then when it's satisfied with the output, it will then give you an output. So one of the things I noticed when I was doing the lab I did at Toronto Metropolitan University, TMU, even in prompting, even with typical text prompting, your chances of getting what you want is better if you use AI to write the prompt. If you try to write a prompt yourself, you're probably not going to ask the best question.
Yeah, something I've noticed even with ChatGPT is ask me 10 questions about this topic so I can kind of move forward. If you just say, oh, write this report, it's mostly
not going to
be
give you a good
nonsense.
result.
So ask me questions to clarify what I want because I'm not even sure, maybe, right?
Exactly. And if you're using, so good tool for vibe coding, as we call it, is Lovable, right? You can just create a website just by asking. We found if you ask for, hey, I want this XYZ website, you get a very horrible website. But if you tell ChatGPT, this is the kind of website I want for Lovable, give me a prompt that will give me that website, then it will ask you more questions and then give you a much more useful prompt that you can then take into Lovable and make what you want. So even there, you already see that the AI understands better what is expected, right? So when you now go into the agentic workflow, that issue of I didn't write the code, I don't understand it. If the agent is the one checking and debugging, it's able to spot better what could be wrong and then like fix or propose to fix or ask the AI to fix. So that's where there was this because again, in academia, it's very theoretical and philosophical. We're asking like, what is the meaning of life? But we were asking each other, so if AI speaks well or communicates better with other AI, what is the role of the human? Because I know we keep asking, what is the role of the AI in our lives? But if you flip that on its head, what is the role of the human?
That's a good question.
When AI systems all talk to each other, why do we need to be there? That's the more theoretical, then I think we can cover in a YouTube
Hmm.
live session. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, all right, so I see time flying. I wonder when it comes to AI implementation at firms, if you have specific advice that I know we have a lot of people with BIM roles. I don't
Hmm.
know if you have a few slides about it, but what advice
Hmm.
would you give if people want to get started when it comes to real
Um,
AI implementations or the things they should consider?
I'm gonna give the advice on two sort of domains. So if you're thinking about it from a technical, which tools can we use? Where do we start? So I'd say the key things for architects, that's where I work, so that's what I can speak to. The key aspects that AI can be useful right now is text generation, which we already discussed, image generation, video generation, even though it's not the best, but it's useful enough, and 3D model generation. There are some BIM AI tools that will do like create a model for you. One of the more popular ones now is Snaptrude. Autodesk has Forma, but I find a lot of those are restricted to certain typologies, so residential, hospitality type of projects. Um, Finch is also a really good one. I think Finch was one of the first to go viral with the AI automated floor plan. So if you're thinking of, let's say, traditional BIM, I'd say to look at Forma, Snaptrude, Finch. Dito is a good one. I think they've been on your channel. They
Yep.
they automate detailing as well. I'm not sponsored, by the way, so if they don't work for you, I wasn't paid to say any of this. And then for image generation, I'd suggest Veras is actually a good one. Um, I know D5 is also good, but I haven't used it because of where their servers are located. So that goes back to the whole data sovereignty conversation. Um, Honestly, my best recommendation if you're going to do AI professionally is to look into Flux Stable Diffusion workflow. So whether that's automatic 1111 or Comfy UI, I have some videos on my channel. There are videos all over YouTube. That would be my recommendation. But if you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty, I think Midjourney has really improved in terms of you can now train a local, like what they call a LoRa for Midjourney, which we didn't used to have. So Midjourney is very dreamy and very like plastic, but I think you could still get a lot more out of it than many tools. For 3D, and I mean here like a Rhino or a Blender 3D, not like a Revit 3D. You could try MeshyAI, or Triple 3D. Those are some good tools. And then for video, I think we still just have Luma, Sora. What's the other one? Oh, there's this other one called Hailu or Halo. I can't pronounce it. It's Hailuo. That one is really good.
So
Um,
for videos, are they?
yeah.
Do you think the models are good enough, or it's mostly kind of a
Eh.
bit of slop and inconsistent? Maybe
So
they've been
I think,
improving, but it's I'm like from what
yeah.
I've seen, I'm not sure they're reliable enough to show
So
to the
let
client,
me
unless you're like
share
Tim Fu and you have like your own custom
like a
advanced model.
proprietary. Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, I think having a proprietary AI model is still the way to go if you're going to use it professionally. But let's assume you can't afford that. Trying to share my screen here. I do have a video to show. Just to because the thing with the video is it's not bad, but it's limited. So first of all, most people don't know this, but a lot of the tools at the moment only let you generate 8 seconds of video per time. So
Mm-hmm.
what you end up getting is a stitch of, that's why the AI videos are very like highly clipped, is
Mm-hmm.
it's just 8 seconds of footage. So this is an example of creating a time lapse, and this was done using this Hailu AI. Um, it looks good. It would be probably less impressive if I had people showing, because then they all start to blur together. And I've also found AI is really bad with use of hands. So not, it used to be the fingers thing where it had like 10 fingers. We've moved on from that. Now it's just using hands. So if someone has to pick something up and put it somewhere else, or eat something, or basically just the hand coordination. It's so off still. So that's just, I think if you remove those elements from your video, you get something convincing enough. The problem with video is it has these weird overlaps that you can't really fix. But I think some very pro users have found ways around that. So there's this one user I follow on LinkedIn. I forget his name right now. I think he's Rory Flynn or so. So what he came up with is actually sketching over the image. So he'll put a path of travel and put a text, and then he'll put in the prompt, when you're done animating my video, delete the instructions and execute, like basically execute what I've drawn and then delete my lines. That's what he puts in the video. So an example, this is so that's VO3. That's the Google one that blew the internet.
So is that like a Roomba commercial or?
Yeah, it's like I don't think it's a commercial. I think he was just trying to animate the Roomba
Uh-huh, yeah.
cleaning the floor,
Uh-huh.
which is hard to do. So you have to give it a very specific path, right? Otherwise, nothing stops it from just going through the cabinet. So those are the little things. I've seen a lot of video exploration. I also talked a lot about it with my students. It's good enough. It's not perfect. I think it's the least impressive of all the things. I think AI for images and for 3D is much more impressive right now than video, but it's useful. It has some practical application, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, and it feels like we're seeing, just if I looked at LinkedIn, what I'm seeing in there, we're seeing the whole spectrum of quality, right? Like the most
Yeah.
cheap images just
Yeah.
generated in like 10 seconds in ChatGPT, but we're
Yeah.
also seeing the other end of the spectrum. People are using it as an art form, putting a lot of
Yeah.
thoughts, a lot of time.
Yeah.
Uh, that is very interesting. But
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's hard to distinguish the signal from the noise because
When
there's
you
so
have a,
much
yeah,
slop that
listen,
sometimes when even the good stuff, you're like, is this really good or is this part of
yeah.
the same slop, right?
And then let's bring this back again to my first point about doing this practically. In an office, you don't have that time. You need a
Mm-hmm.
video in 30 minutes. You don't want to like iterate endlessly and hope for the best, right? So that's the challenge, I think, especially with video, is like people are not quite sure, and a lot of the video tools are not local, like let's say like Veras, for example, where you can. And so I've been mentioning Veras so much, I hope they don't reach out to me after this live. um but it's kind of just one of the good ones because it does video, it does image, and it lets you, fine tune in your Revit app and so on. But back to my point, it's not easy to get these tools in the profession, especially if you have strict IT cybersecurity protocols. A lot of these tools are not easy to pass those tests. So that's still a limitation that I've been having, is I'm doing a lot of experimentation like on my own, but to apply that in an office, it's not good enough that it gives you a nice image. It needs to be safe, it needs to be repeatable, and it needs to make sense in terms of cost versus, usage.
Uh,
So
uh,
I just,
yeah.
yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I see we have a few questions we should take,
Yes,
but
before we take the questions, I
yeah.
just wanted to mention one tool that I really love just because
Yeah.
I like talking about this tool. It's Formas.
Formas, not Forma.
Formas AI, not Forma, has nothing to do
Mm-hmm.
with Autodesk, but I like it because it lets you combine sketches with prompts. And this is an example. So this image is actually a real image. This is like a photograph. And what one of my students did was to take that image, sketch over it, get a prompt. So you feed the image into ChatGPT, you get a prompt from it, and then you put that into formats, and then you get this. So in terms of control, it's close enough where you can decide what you want. Now, the catch 22, this is also another example. So this is a real image and this is the
Mm-hmm.
formats. The catch 22 here is we found that this is good when you have like a reference you're trying to copy, but when you're trying to design from scratch, the results are usually worse off if you constrain the image. It's probably better to let it, generate something. So just one of those tools that I really love because it gives people that layer of control that they need from AI. Okay, back to the questions.
Uh, yeah, well, I was curious to know. So, at Architecture 49, how are you implemented AI? Are there things that you've done systematically so far that you've set up and using on a
Yes.
daily basis? As much
Um,
as you can share. I'm sure some of it
yeah,
is
as much as I
confidential as well.
as much as I can share. So I think for us, we have a very unique IT ecosystem because we have a strategic partnership with a larger company. So whenever we get things implemented, it's usually not just Architecture 49. There's a lot of, you know, players involved. Um, Broadly speaking, we do use most of the Autodesk products. So that would be Forma. Um, I've mentioned Veras, so we do use Veras because it's very well compatible with tools we already use, Enscape, um, Forma, Revit, right? So that's for the design side. But we've done a lot more, I think, on the tech side. So we use Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. We've tried and implemented agents, which are similar to custom GPTs, but with a bit more control. Like you can customize a little bit more. The agents are really good for the kind of projects we do because we have a lot of, as you know, in Canada, we have a lot of regulations, not just building regulations, but strict codes. So a lot of our project typologies need to meet very specific, like rigid, let's say floor square meter area or room sizes, those sort of things. Like it's not just the broad architectural requirements, it's actually the actual design requirements as well. So we have a lot of agents to support people searching for that information, so that it's not um who emails back and forth or asking someone, that sort of thing. The issue again is from a risk perspective, you never want to say, oh, I didn't see that requirement because AI didn't show me,
Hmm.
right? So as much as we've seen good results from it, it's not safe to fully rely on it. And then that goes back to the question, a busy professional is trying to get work done and you're telling them, yes, this AI is good, but you have to fact check it each time. It's like I might as well just read the document, you know? So that's where it's useful in certain things where there's not much risk, where like maybe for a certain department you have a repository of documents so that people can ask that department questions. That's less risk than a project where an architect has to stamp, right? In terms of structure, we're exploring things like prompt libraries. So I saw this from some guy on Twitter where you can actually create sample prompts for people on your team so that they can take those prompts and generate something close to what you would get. It's not perfect because again, prompting depends on the model, it depends on the tool, but it helps different levels of users to be able to get tangible results from AI without spending too much time. We've also been exploring all of the tools I've talked about, video, 3D, all of them. We've covered quite a bit of ground actually, but in terms of putting them on projects, we would need to be careful, right? We don't also want to give away our professional status that, oh, AI is doing your job for you. That's the last thing we want, right? So all of these conversations are still new even to the profession. Like it's, if we're putting renders out there, obviously they have to be labeled, but what does that mean? Do we then have to, tell, like, does the client have a problem with this? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of gray area legally that people are still waiting to figure out before they use AI on production work. But for operational tasks, like things that get you doing your job faster, there's already a lot implemented on a day-to-day, I'd say.
Yeah, so lots of questions to be solved. Something for sure is I think firms should have document their internal procedures, SOPs well. It could be in a
Yeah.
Notion file, it could be in SharePoint, anything. But
Yeah.
if then AI can start from there to use that to help you, that's
Yeah.
already a big plus. And if just organizing
Definitely.
your information and your procedures is something you do, it has value by itself. But
Yeah.
in the age of AI, it's going to be even better.
Yeah, I've been exploring a lot of NotebookLM of late.
Hmm.
It's such a good tool. I
No,
just put on
so
like,
can you explain
yeah,
what is that?
Notebook
Notebook
LM.
LM. Is it Google or?
No, wait, I think it is. I haven't used it long enough to remember the company that owns it. It's Google, but it's available as an app on your phone as well. So I'm
Hmm.
using mostly the mobile version. I like that one because I do a lot of YouTube University training where I learn everything on YouTube. And I'm able to take all of my YouTube videos into a NotebookLM and it will create a podcast style explanation of whatever you put in there or a PowerPoint presentation or a quiz, and it can even give you flashcards. So sometimes you're not in the mood to watch a 1 hour video, like this live, for example. And you put that into Notebook LM, it will sort of summarize it in different formats. So let's say you like mind maps or you prefer to read, it will give you a different format for the same content. So depending on where your energy is at for the day, you're able to still, consume the information. So like one thing I did recently, I took all of Gavin's Aussie BIM Guru's C Sharp series. I put it in Notebook LM so that it could summarize like the C because I already use C Sharp, so I wasn't sure which videos would apply to me or not. So it just gave me like a PowerPoint so I could just go straight to the pages that I needed to refresh on. So I find that one to be very good, even if you're not like an organization. It's just a really good app to have. But yeah, that would be one example of
Yeah,
just
I know a lot
yeah.
of people at firms like might use ChatGPT, but not in an organization context. It's almost like their personal use, but they still use it at work, which of course opens all sort of questions about privacy and so on.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, all right. I think we should take some questions. Let's have
Yeah.
a look. So if you have questions, now is the time to ask. Let's see. Question from Germany. Where are the areas you think AI is already advanced enough to give you reliable results in your task as
Mm.
an architect or civil engineers? But you kind of answered that already, right?
I think I kind of did, but I'll
Hmm.
just reiterate it again. Mainly images, text, and 3D. And not BIM 3D, mesh solid 3D. So if you have like a sculpture or something that doesn't need parameters, you can get a very convincing image or text to AI. I
Uh,
have some examples if
okay.
people want to see.
From
Um,
Michael, can AI already automate ISO 19650 compliance checks effectively?
that's a very good question, and I'll answer that question with another question. Well, what is an ISO 19650 compliance check exactly? Because as far as I remember, the ISO 19650 gives you guidelines to form your own standards. There aren't exactly um directly translatable, depending on the project, you won't get a standard that is exact. It's not like code checking. It's not quite the same. It's a guideline. So how do you check it against the guideline? Maybe against your own internal standards. I know that Autodesk is announcing a assistant that's coming soon. And we have these MCPs from Claude as well. I don't really know that that lets you check. But if it exists, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, maybe from Plannerly. I should
Maybe, yeah. I
check
think,
them out. But that would be the
yeah,
company I would check out. So check out Plannerly.
yeah,
Everything about ISO, they're a pretty good reference, I think.
yeah. Other thing to mention, all the companies now are having an AI add-on. So
Hmm.
any app you already use will probably have an AI add-on at some point. So I've shared, or I'm sharing what the AI 3D looks like. So I think I've already posted this on my LinkedIn a couple of times, but you see it's like a very smooth mesh. If you have this in a Revit model, it's probably going to be too heavy. You're probably better off not using AI for Revit 3D. This is an interior mesh. It's not very good, so don't recommend it for like an interior image of a space. But for buildings or exterior, it's fair. It gives you a starting point, especially if you just need a reference and not something to like work on further.
And what app is that
This
to create the
is
meshes?
3Po 3D or MeshyAI. I forget which one.
MeshyAI. Yeah, I think you showed it
Yeah.
on the screen earlier on.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Depending
like
on.
that's a good example. Like why would I want to spend hours modeling the pantheon. But maybe I just need it as a reference, you know. And it does apply the image as a kind of mesh over it. So you don't have to think about materials either. One thing I haven't had the time to explore, but I find interesting is AI for VR experiences. So people have forgotten about virtual reality because of all the
Yeah.
hype around AI. But I think there are now AI tools that would take an image and then generate a virtual walkthrough. Some people are also using it for Gaussian splatting, which is the more advanced version of point cloud. So we might be able to do more in terms of experiencing space with images than we used to be able to do before AI. Just not for like, BIM specific uses.
All right, we've got a couple more minutes, then we'll have to
Yeah.
jump. From Sid here, I am an architectural technologist trying to transition into BIM role. What are the next steps I should take? What are your career advice for Sid?
I think this is a honest advice is consider what that role looks like for you maybe 10, 20 years from now. I think a lot of people don't think about this when they get into BIM, but when you do succeed and you become a BIM coordinator or a BIM manager, what comes after that? Or are you content to just stay there forever? A lot of people transition into consulting, or maybe moving to other kinds of management,
Or
but
software development
or
sometimes.
software development, but that, unlike typical engineering, that career path hasn't really been properly defined in many places. So before you even make the plunge, I'd say think about your long-term future. However, in the immediate, like short term, make sure that you're in a country where BIM does have a market. I don't think it's actually a global phenomenon, unfortunately. So depending on where you live, maybe people don't really need BIM professionals that much. And then maybe you're better off giving them AI tools because, like I said, AI affects everyone, not just the engineers. So there's probably some accountant or manager that needs AI where you are. But then if all of that is fine, you're in a good, location, then I'd say to get some sort of certification. It doesn't have to be a degree like I did. I think I actually have a whole video about this on my channel. Um, I wouldn't know any good ones, unfortunately, because I actually went to like a formal master's degree. But having a credential sets you apart. When we started BIM, and I say we collectively, because I think I remember the first video that Gavin Crum posted on his YouTube channel, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
being so excited. So I feel like even though we've only recently gotten to know each other, I feel like I started at the same time
Mm-hmm.
as a lot of the people that we know in this space. It
Can you?
wasn't common. Yeah.
Sorry, what is your? It's the BIM Mentor, right? Like your YouTube
Yes,
channel.
the BIM mentor.
I
The
also
BIM
linked
mentor.
to in the video description to your website, so I guess people can find
Yes.
information about you, your YouTube channel, and so on in the link in the video
Yes.
description.
Yes. And I'm always available on LinkedIn as much as possible if you ever want to reach out. Um, so yes, so back to my point is when we started, there wasn't enough people with BIM skills. So it wasn't too difficult to step into that role when clients started to demand BIM. All you needed was a bit more advanced experience than the average user, and you could grow into the role just based on the organization training you and all that sort of stuff. It's changed now. Like I find now on projects, I have so many experienced people that my new challenge is convincing them that my approach is a good idea. It used to be like you're training people and teaching them. Now everyone just is an expert. And it's like, no, maybe there's a reason why we take this approach instead of this approach. So it's a bit harder now to differentiate yourself. And that's why I think having some kind of credential might be a good idea. Fortunately, I can't recommend any off the top of my head.
All right, so there's a lot of questions. I don't think we're gonna have time
Okay.
to go to all of them. Well, first a comment from Elizabeth. This session was so informative. You are an impressive woman, and I am now a follower.
Oh, thank you so much.
From Andrew, do you have any concern about the architect being able to retain copyright of the content produced by AI?
That's a good question, and that's a question I get a lot. So, um, legally speaking, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not even sure what copyright entails in terms of is style copyrightable? because that's what AI does. It's not taking your work, it's taking a style, right? So I may not have insight into the, fine lines, but I will give an example of what happened when I started teaching students. And I refer to students because that was more of an open experimental area. In practice, you have to be a bit more careful, right? A lot of the students came in either not liking AI or thinking AI was horrible or thinking AI would, make architecture less interesting. By the end, they either still thought AI was not great or had a more objective, they just now saw it as an instrument. So I could already rank, oh, that student is gifted with AI versus that student, right? So it's easy to think AI is, and I've mentioned randomization quite often, but like there is a skill to AI. There are people who are good with AI and there are people who may struggle with AI. I don't know what it is. And incidentally, I found a weird trait where my really bright intellectual students struggled with AI. It's almost like when you judge it too harshly, you don't enter the mind of an experimenting person and you don't get a good result, right? So AI has a certain skill. It's not going to take away anyone's creative control. If anything, it's just getting you to your result faster. It's like comparing it to creating a model and then rendering the model. But instead, now you're just doing a sketch and a prompt. The idea is still yours. The fine-tuning is still you. And I don't know if you've seen purely AI generated content, but it's usually not very good. So there is a bit of design curation. The architect has to now curate the image. So it's still your work in the end. But legally, I don't know. um,
Yeah, legal questions
yeah,
is a bit touchy. All right, a
yeah.
couple more maybe.
Sure. No,
Rapid
it's okay. Yeah,
rapid fire. Let's see.
yeah.
Is Victoria worried about liability from using apps created by vibe coding?
No, because I'm not using any external app. I am using plugins. So I'm a BIM manager, so I'm automating things like scheduling or tags, things that would be done manually anyway. I'm just getting there faster. So no, not me specifically, but broadly speaking, people should be concerned not just about liability, but also cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just use any tool. They sometimes put you know malicious code in. Some people have now put it in the LLM, so you probably get some leaks, if you're not careful. So no, for my practical uses, I'm not using anything that would expose us to that kind of liability.
From Valeria, how can we use AI to improve our Revit skills? If I may answer, like ChatGPT can help you if you ask a very basic Revit question. If you start asking something a bit more advanced, it makes stuff up. Like it says, use this command, but the command doesn't exist.
The
So
command doesn't exist.
sometimes I receive question from people in our communities like, ChatGPT told me to do that, but it doesn't really work. I'm not sure how to find that tool. It's like, yeah, I just made something up out of
Yeah.
nowhere. So you have
That's
to
one
be
thing
careful.
one thing I don't like about AI, unlike Google, it gives you no results found. AI will always say something.
Hmm.
Something, but it's crap. I think there's a custom Revit GPT that is helpful. I think it's called Revit GPT Helper. It has like 50,000 users. So apparently that's a good one. That's the only thing I'd add on to that.
Okay. Someone says, do not use MeshyAI in Revit. Your BIM manager, me, will revoke your Autodesk license.
Yes, please listen to that person. It's not allowed for Revit. It's actually very bad. I was just testing if it could work, and it did work, but it's highly not recommended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question from Jamai. How far is AI now from generating customized construction details based on typical details database? That's a harsh one because, like, to me, it feels like they're always like 80% of the way there. But there's always part is like, what is that? That's weird. So they are like, we have to verify all of the drawings anyway. So
Yeah.
just verifying and fixing the part that's broken is as long as doing it from scratch. So I don't know how that's going to be resolved. What do you think?
I mean, I've seen Dito's AI, I think it's like a proprietary AI system they have. I think
Mhm.
it's good. I think it's good enough. Um, the challenge might be, is it suitable for your team? Like, do you do details enough that you would need to pay for an AI subscription system to manage that, right? But I think what they have, because it's also based on your own library, which again goes back to what data do you have? Because you only get from AI as good as what you train it on. So if you already had a good collection of details, I think you could possibly get something. I'm not using it for that purpose right now, but the question is, do you have a library of good details to start
Hmm.
with? Which, depending on how you've done that, it might be.
Okay, the real final question is: the weather
Yeah,
better where you are now in Toronto or in the UK?
that's a very good question. I think that the sun in Toronto produces heat, which is refreshing, but it's much colder. So to answer your question, I like both for different reasons. The UK is more gray, but less cold. Toronto is more cold, but when it's sunny, it's actually, warmer. I was shocked to experience in England that when it's sunny, it's just light.
Hmm.
Doesn't do anything. Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. That's a very good one.
All right, so that's gonna be it. I'm just going to mention a couple of things, and we're gonna close this out. Oh wait, I have too many tabs open now. Give me a sec. All right, almost there. So the Winter of BIM, a series of new content we're launching soon on the BIM Pure membership about keynotes, casework, Revit modeling, mastering ECC for Revit projects, soon coming to the BIM Pure membership. Thanks to Guardian for sponsoring this episode of BIM Pure Live. The next episode of BIM Pure Live with Kieran Cardozo about Revit Concrete Masterclass 2 weeks from now at the same time on Wednesday. And yeah, that's it. Back to you, Victoria. That was amazing. This was really
Thank
fun. So,
you.
any final word or like shout out or somewhere that you want
Yes.
to point people to?
Yes, I think you already mentioned my website. So victoriaikede.com is live. All of my information is there, including my YouTube channel and my LinkedIn. If there's anything more you'd like to learn about AI, there is a waitlist form there for you to just tell me what you want to learn. And generally speaking, stay curious. Like AI always evokes strong feelings, but it's technology. Just be objective about it. When it's bad, it's bad, and when it's okay, it's okay. Don't project human because it gives human responses. I think we project human feelings onto it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still just tech. So let's just be objective about it.
Good final words. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. See you in two
Thank you
weeks.
all.
Goodbye,
See
everyone.
you.
See you.